Hey guys, Stray Kid here, and today I'm going to be talking about a really interesting scenario I've actually wanted to do since the creation of this channel. At the end of World War II, it was becoming pretty apparent that the Soviet Union wasn't going to liberate, its eastern bloc, but instead turn into a bunch of satellite states. The British had devised a plan to kick the Soviets out of Eastern Europe in a way to stop the spread of communism. This plan would be known as Operation Unthinkable, as the entire idea of fighting the Soviets out of Eastern Europe was unthinkable. But what if it wasn't that unthinkable? Most of the plan really relied on America helping, as the UK, needed all that American industry and nukes and stuff. But America most likely wouldn't help Britain in this case, as they were still dealing with Japan. Truman would most likely not want to help, believing that he would most likely anger the troops, given the fact that the troops would have to fight the people they just shook hands with, and they wouldn't even give Britain the nukes, as they would see obviously that the nukes really need to go to Japan, as if they don't, they're going to lose several American lives, and Truman might even put his presidency at risk. This would most likely, cause a giant gap, as America would not let them use their occupied zones in Germany. So Britain would just have to go around and not use nukes. So the invasion would begin. They would launch invasions through Germany, Italy, Greece, and Iran with the help of France, Spain, and Portugal, as they also wanted to kick out the Soviets. The surprise attack would most likely surprise the Soviets, but they'd quickly begin to reinforce their position, along with the Yugoslavians, and the massive amounts of the Red Army would quickly begin to flood into Germany, Yugoslavia, Greece, and Iran. Just like Germany, the UK would most likely make good land during the initial, surprise invasion, but quickly find that, the Soviets' numbers were way too much compared to theirs, and they would realize that, they were going to be completely screwed. The British would most likely be way overwhelmed with the Soviet numbers and not be able to, keep up with how much men they had in Germany. British troops would begin to be pushed back to their borders, causing mass panic in British Parliament, as in Iran, the British would actually be stalemating as they can't get past the mountains there, with the Yugoslavians pushing the Italians back to the border, which the Italians would be very upset that, war is being waged on their land again. But with the Greeks, they'd be pretty happy that they've been liberated from the communists. Meanwhile, in France, the Free French forces, who were mostly communists during World War II, would begin to rebel against the French, blowing up trains and supply routes, as they were pretty angry that France was now fighting the communists, as, they were communists. And that would cause France to leave the war because they were too afraid that their already unstable government was going to fall apart again. A mass panic would begin as Britain lost even more land to the Soviets, and Italy was being invaded at this point as Greece was getting pushed back on. Meanwhile, in Asia, the Americans would most likely beat the ever-living hell out of Japan and eventually, nuke them, because, only change this time is that the fact that the Soviets wouldn't invade from Manchukuo, as, they were busy invading Europe with all of its forces in defense of the motherland. So, whenever Japan surrenders, all that land goes to America instead. And after the withdrawal of the Japanese forces from Asia, the Communist and Nationalist forces would take those lands right up, and after America decides to help out the Nationalists since Europe's being, overrun by commies and they can't really do anything about it at this point, they would slowly crush the Communist forces. With the communists in Asia finally dealt with, and America finally busy to, focus on what the UK is doing, the USA, France, and the Soviet Union would finally force the UK into surrender. Of course, this would give the Soviets even more land in Norway, Denmark, Germany, and Greece, along with them losing Iran, since the US didn't want them to keep that. This would most likely ruin relations between the British and the USA, the British finally deciding to make their own faction, the British Empire, or the Imperials. The US didn't really care that much, as he still had the mainland of Europe on his side, along with some new Eastern allies. But the Soviets would most likely, become even more paranoid with the British attacking and all, and most likely, ask America the question, why didn't you help us? Which America wouldn't really want to answer, so that'd cause even more distrust. After what would be seen as the Anglo-Soviet War, and this would cause even more divides in Europe, as Britain would no longer want to see itself as part of the West, but instead some type of Anglosphere faction, which would be, I guess, the third world in this country, making a fourth world. How cool. But this would make the Iron Curtain even worse, as the Nordic countries that were capitalists were completely encircled at this point, and most of Africa was cut off by the British, who would refuse to talk to the West or the East, seeing them both as enemies. Anyways, guys, that's going to end off the video today. If you like the video, please hit the like button, so then, the YouTube algorithm will like me. And if you like my content in general, please subscribe so you can see more of it. And comment anything below where you think, it would have changed the scenario, or how you think it would have gone, and leave any suggestions for scenarios you might want me to do in the below. I don't know why I called it the below. Anyways, guys, bye.
United forever in friendship and labor, our mighty republics will ever endure. The great Soviet Union will live through the ages, the dream of a people, their fortress secure.